Are you going to play Obi-Wan Kenobi again?
Yes.
I smell profit!
After waves of fan-made fake trailers with Ewan McGregor footage from other films and one official fake trailer with Ewan McGregor footage from other films, they now have dropped a real trailer with music from other films. I would consider Duel of the Fates here as a little cheating, but who cares, the Kenobi trailer is out and it's epic. And by the time I release this video, YouTube is probably already flooding with many half-minute teasers for the first episodes. The Kenobi show is by far the most anticipated of the new upcoming Star Wars shows, and maybe even more anticipated than the last Clone Wars season was. And probably also more anticipated than the last two sequels movies were. But I mean, that's obvious because they didn't have Obi-Wan in them, so I admit that's a bad comparison. But back on the topic, Ewan McGregor and John Williams have put the hype train back on track with this teaser, and fans can't wait to see more. It's probably the biggest hype among Star Wars fans since years, with many being carefully optimistic, given the fact that Disney's lead gave us, let's say, limited amount of quality storytelling in Star Wars the last years.
Let's go, Chrome Dome.
Contrary to all my other Star Wars YouTube colleagues who flooded your notification feed with trailer breakdowns the minute the Kenobi teaser was released, I'm not going to talk about the top 10 Easter eggs you have missed. Not most of the time. I'd rather ask you, have you ever seen it from another point of view? Can the Kenobi show really match the expectations we have after all this hype? And given the fact that it's probably impossible to have a sober look on the Kenobi show right now, this video is my try to deal with my thoughts, and also your thoughts, about the possible highs and lows this show might offer. And you might also get some interesting background information you can flex on your friends with. So first of all, when the show was announced at Disney's Investors Day in 2020, I asked myself, do we really need this show? Is there really any new story for Obi-Wan? Conclusively, I immediately got Solo spin-off flashbacks where also many people asked if you really need an origin story for one of cinema's most iconic smugglers. Even though I think that the film was not as bad as most people and critics say, there have been many problems behind the scenes because they didn't quite know how to handle such a big legacy.
Solo.
There have been many reported issues in the production, such as creative differences about what the film's style should actually be like. The original directors, Phil Lord and Chris Miller, had visions of a very improvised, comedy-styled film in the direction of Guardians of the Galaxy, which you still see in some film passages and in some outtakes. Star Wars veteran and scriptwriter Lawrence Kasdan, who already wrote the script for Empire Strikes Back, and from there on for most of the other Star Wars movies featuring Han Solo, wanted a more serious feeling, and so also did Disney's owner Kathleen Kennedy, and made Kasdan an advisor for the directors. It seemed like the many different producers had many different visions for this iconic role, which also led to the replacement of many involved in the creating process. For these creative differences, and with only 3 days of shooting left, Lord and Miller finally left the project, and damage limiter Ron Howard had to reshoot almost 70% of the movie in just 3 months. You also kind of recognize these many personal and creative choices in the final movie, which makes it feel a little stuffed together and inconsistent in its style. Even though that does personally not bother me much, the movie became Star Wars' first big flop at the box office. So with this in mind, I became very cautious when Disney announced that they wanted to completely rewrite the Kenobi script. Kathleen Kennedy stated that the original story drafts by Hossein Amini were too bleak and wouldn't match the expectations. Also, Amini wrote the script based on the expectation that it's going to be a full movie, until Disney decided to extend it to a whole show when they started their own streaming service, Disney+. And now Amini was replaced by Joby Harold, who rewrote the script together with the new director Deborah Chow, who replaced the originally planned English theatre director Stephen Daldry, of whom I have never heard of before anyway. But the overall point here is that there have been ongoing creative differences in the production, which led to a shift of schedule of over 1 year. So there are clear parallels between the production and handling between the spin-off of the iconic Han Solo and the spin-off of the iconic Obi-Wan Kenobi. Hopefully these, also quite common, production issues will stay the only parallels between those two projects. Nevertheless, I think that Deborah Chow is a capable director and will somehow manage to make the most out of it. And if not, who cares? It's Kenobi, so there is literally no chance they can ruin that. Leaked information reveals Amini's original idea was that Obi-Wan would never have left Tatooine and has to protect Luke against local Tusken tribes and warlords. Also, Darth Maul would have played a major role in this first draft of the story. But Star Wars veterans Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau should have encouraged Kathleen Kennedy to go bigger with the project, which I think is a good idea considering that this original plot would have been a little too replaceable and stretched, but that also leads me to the next big point. Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau, but especially Dave Filoni, are arguably the most influential Star Wars creative minds since the last 10 to 15 years. You can say he carried the whole franchise alone in the period between Revenge of the Sith and the release of the sequels, and probably also after them. Shows like The Clone Wars and Rebels are, despite their bumpy start, iconic and great shows that are loved by the fans and also manage to make the prequels much more loved and comprehensible. I have already made a video about that and will probably make some more videos about how Star Wars has changed over time, so let me know in the comments what you want to hear about this. Yet it occurs to me that Filoni has become a little overambitious when creating or introducing new content. I personally think he has moved away from his Clone Wars style of storytelling, where it was mostly about creating interesting story arcs that portray the war from different sides and show different aspects, to a more fan-based form of storytelling by pleasing the crowds and probably also his own inner fanboy a little. I remember the Clone Wars and also some part of Rebels as mostly conclusive in terms of connecting the existing lore and story from the films, and also in terms of continuing the individual story of the characters. I also really loved how they introduced new characters and weaved them into the existing storyline. I'm often, not always but often, missing this careful and caring handling for story and characters in the newer content we get. And I also think that Marvel is doing a way better job on this one than Star Wars does. So don't get me wrong here, I mean it doesn't bother me that much, and I might also stress this topic a little too much, but the reliance on old characters or things really stands out and sometimes really imposes itself once they overuse it too much. Which I admit doesn't happen too often, but I think you get the point. One good example of the old style of good character arcs in the new content I can think of is Bill Burr's character in The Mandalorian, Mayfeld. He was introduced as a complete douche in the first season and then completely changed him during season 2. They managed to make him undergo very much character development in just one episode, and even though this was just a filler episode, it was so fun to watch and you really have a good and conclusive character arc here. I'd really like to see more of those small story gems in the future. One example I can come up with which did it not so good in my opinion is The Bad Batch, where nearly the whole show is just a mission hopping between old characters and old set pieces. No character there has really development, and there's also no real story so far, even though it also had its many good parts in it. I also think that many of the cameos and Easter eggs in The Mandalorian, and especially in the Book of Boba Fett, feel a little out of place and rushed most of the time. Which already brings me to the next point. When Ahsoka was first brought to live action by Rosario Dawson in The Mandalorian, the thing fans were arguing most was the design of her head, where. Side fact, the tails are called Leku and the horns are called Montrals. When you compare them to the ones from the Clone Wars and Rebels, you notice that they should be way bigger than they actually are in live action. The same thing goes for Cad Bane in the Book of Boba Fett, where he just looks not right. And now with the Kenobi trailer, we have a weird looking Grand Inquisitor played by Rupert Friend, which the internet already roasted enough about. I also don't really want to talk about that too much because I already covered that in my video about the Book of Boba Fett, but it kind of bothers me that the live action costumes we get are not fitting at all. And it's not just about the costumes here, but what this tells us about the overall attitude of the creators to the project. I'd rather wait a few more months longer and have a solid and nice Star Wars experience than being constantly reminded that they just slept on some design choices, because they had maybe too less time or not enough money. And now many people argue that they adapted this from a very stylized animated show and that we are also fine with Dooku and Palpatine, who also look very different, but that's not the point, because these species already exist in Star Wars movies. Real Star Wars movies. The Grand Inquisitor is a Pau'an who lives on Utapau, and we're seen in Revenge of the Sith in different shapes and costumes. So from $1 million production who can even deepfake Luke's younger face on an other actor for half an episode, I would expect they are capable of recreating an already existing humanoid species, where they also have perfect live action examples of. I know there may be some reasons I don't understand why it's pretty hard to do these costumes, but they will find a way if they want it. It's details like these that kind of break the illusion of a rounded Star Wars experience, and in this case also makes the character hard to take serious. Not Rupert Friend, he's a great actor, but the character is visually just a little off. Please let me know in the comments, because I'm very curious if you also think that his look destroys the illusion, or if you're fine with that. And talking about illusion, we already made it to my last point. When we are hyped for Obi-Wan in the show, we should be thinking about which Obi-Wan we really mean. His performance in the prequel trilogy was arguably one of the best of the cast, and he's also a very great and lovely actor.
Another happy landing.
But we should not forget that the perception of the prequels was pretty bad when they came out.
I don't like sand.
I would say one of the significant reasons for its positive perception nowadays is the animated Clone Wars show. This show managed to explain the events and world of the prequel trilogy far more detailed, and also made characters more comprehensible and lovable. Also the relation between Obi-Wan and Anakin. And here's the point, many people started to like Obi-Wan, or like him even more, because of his appearance in the Clone Wars, which was voiced by James Arnold Taylor and not Ewan McGregor. So it's the personal note by James Arnold Taylor. And that's who also many people may refer to when they talk about nice Obi-Wan moments.
This may not be the time to ask, but were you and Satine ever...
I don't see how that has any bearing on the situation at hand.
So don't get me wrong here, there is literally no chance that Ewan will not do an astonishing Obi-Wan performance, but we should have in mind which kind of Obi-Wan performance we get here. A mix between a broken Ewan McGregor from Revenge of the Sith and the hermit Alec Guinness, who Owen referred to as strange and old.
Oh, what if he's related to Ben?
That wizard's just a crazy old man.
At the beginning of the story, he will still be rather broken, probably living in a cave, and sees his purpose in only protecting young Luke. So only as the story advances, he will find hope again. We see in the trailer that he will leave Tatooine, and leaks say that he will probably seek out to help young Leia and Bail Organa. Those will also probably be more present in the show than young Luke, for example. Concept art from the first teaser we got also support these story options, and we already see the supposed base of a rebel cell. In the live action trailer, we only got to see one of the planets besides Tatooine and the Inquisitor Fortress planet that is known from Jedi Fallen Order yet. This new underworld vibe planet is called Deo and was inspired by the old market districts of Hong Kong, which also reminded me of the Pirates of the Caribbean Singapore scenes. But I think we will explore way more new and already known worlds in the show, because all of the recently released Disney Plus shows mainly showed footage from just the first episodes in their first trailers. And I also think that is because many of the later episodes are still in post-production, or they don't want to spoil too many story options yet. Overall, I'm really optimistic for the show and I am excited for what we get. I don't think we get much in the style of the prequels, which also made Ewan's Obi-Wan iconic, but I have no problems with experiencing something new with this show that also feels kind of familiar. I also have faith in Deborah Chow's qualities as a director. I also hope she kind of took the chance to evolve with this project. And if not, who cares? It's Kenobi, so there's literally no chance they can mess this up.